My brothers and sisters in the light, the Essenes had a strict rule about counting money. They would never, under any circumstances, count their money alone, not in private, not in secret, not even in the safety of their own homes with the door locked and the shutters closed and no one watching. Whenever money was counted, whenever coins were sorted, whenever financial accounts were reviewed, at least one other person had to be present. This rule was absolute. It was never broken. It was considered one of the most important financial principles in their entire tradition. And for over 200 years, while they followed this rule, not a single family in their community fell into poverty. Not one. The connection between these two facts is not coincidental. Today, I am going to reveal why this rule existed. I am going to explain exactly what happens in the spiritual realm when you count money alone. I am going to show you the doors that open, the spirits that enter, and the curses that activate. And I am going to teach you how to protect yourself from the poverty curse that has been silently operating in your life every time you have counted money in isolation. Most people count their money in private. This is considered normal. This is considered wise. They sit alone at their kitchen table late at night when everyone else is asleep, sorting bills and coins, adding up what they have, calculating what they owe, checking their bank accounts on their phones in the darkness. They think privacy is prudent. They think secrecy protects them from thieves and from the envy of others. They think that money is a private matter that should not involve anyone else. But the Essenes understood something that the modern world has completely forgotten, something that banks and financial institutions certainly will not teach you. When you count money alone, you open a door, not a physical door, a spiritual door, a door that should remain closed, a door that lets something in that is very difficult to remove once it enters. Every time you have counted money in secret, in isolation, in privacy, you have been opening this door without knowing it. Let me explain what happens spiritually when you count money in isolation. There are 4 specific consequences that the Essenes identified through generations of observation. The first thing that happens is that you invite the spirit of anxiety. When you count money alone, there is no one to witness your abundance. There is no one to remind you of God's faithfulness. There is only you and the numbers. And the numbers are never enough. They never satisfy. No matter how much you count, the spirit of anxiety whispers that it is not enough. You need more. You should have more. Others have more. Something is wrong with you. This spirit of anxiety attaches itself to your money. It does not leave when you put the money away. It stays. It follows you. It wakes you at 3 in the morning with worry. It steals your peace during the day. It makes you unable to enjoy what you have because you are always calculating what you lack. The Essenes understood that this spirit enters through the door of solitary counting. The second thing that happens is that you activate the spirit of greed. When you count money alone, there is no accountability. There is no one to remind you that money is a tool, not a treasure. There is no one to balance your thoughts with wisdom. In isolation, the spirit of greed whispers to your soul. It tells you to keep more. It tells you to give less. It tells you that you deserve to accumulate without sharing. It makes your fist tighten around what you hold instead of opening your hand to bless others. The Essenes observed that people who counted money alone became progressively more stingy over time. Their generosity decreased. Their willingness to share diminished. Their hearts hardened toward the needs of others. The spirit of greed had entered through the door of solitary counting and had taken residence in their souls. The third thing that happens is that you break the principle of witness. In the Torah, important matters are established by 2 or 3 witnesses. A legal case requires witnesses. A covenant requires witnesses. A testimony requires witnesses. The Essenes understood that your money is not just currency. Your money is a testimony of God's provision in your life. When you count it, you are taking inventory of God's faithfulness. This is a sacred act, and sacred acts require witnesses. When you count money alone, without witnesses, you are treating God's provision as a private matter between you and the numbers. But God's provision is never private. It is always relational. It comes through community. It is meant to bless community. When you exclude witnesses from the counting, you exclude the community dimension of provision. You disconnect your money from its relational purpose. And when money is disconnected from relationship, it loses its blessing and becomes a curse. The fourth thing that happens is that you create an opening for the poverty curse. This is the most dangerous consequence. The poverty curse does not enter through obvious doors. It enters through subtle doors, doors that seem innocent, doors that seem practical. The door of solitary counting is one of these subtle entries. When you count money alone, you are declaring through your actions that you do not trust others with knowledge of your finances. You are declaring that money is something to be hidden, something to be secretive about, something to be ashamed of or proud of in isolation. These declarations create agreements in the spiritual realm, agreements that the spirit of poverty can use as legal access to your finances. The Essenes understood this principle through generations of observation. They watched families who counted money alone slowly decline into poverty over time. They watched families who always counted money with witnesses consistently prosper. The pattern was unmistakable. The principle was clear. Never count money alone. Now let me tell you the specific practice the Essenes followed. Whenever an Essene needed to count money, they would invite at least one other person to be present. This person did not need to help with the counting. They did not need to know the exact amounts. They simply needed to be present as a witness. Their presence served multiple purposes. First, the witness kept anxiety at bay. When another person is present, the spirit of anxiety cannot whisper as loudly. The presence of another human being reminds you that you are not alone in the world. You are part of a community. Your struggles are shared. Your burdens can be carried together. The witness simply being there reduces anxiety naturally. Second, the witness kept greed in check. When another person is present, you are less likely to hoard. You are reminded that your money exists in relationship to others. You are reminded that generosity is watching. You are reminded that you will give account for how you steward what has been entrusted to you. The witness keeps your heart soft when it might otherwise harden. Third, the witness established the count in the spiritual realm. With a witness present, your inventory of God's provision becomes a testimony. It becomes official. It becomes established. The witness does not need to speak. Their presence is the confirmation. What is counted with a witness is counted in heaven. What is counted alone remains uncertain and unstable. Fourth, the witness closed the door to the poverty curse. The spirit of poverty cannot enter where community is present. It looks for isolation. It looks for secrecy. It looks for the person who separates themselves from others when it comes to money. When a witness is present, that door is closed. That entry point is sealed. The poverty curse cannot activate because the conditions for its activation have been prevented. Before I continue with more details, let me share something important. What I am teaching today is just the beginning. The complete Essene wealth system has been compiled into a 21-day protocol that I have prepared for those who are serious about permanent transformation. It is called the Essene Wealth Code, 21 Days to Financial Freedom. In this guide, you will find this principle explained in full detail, along with prayers to speak when counting money with a witness, and 20 other practices that will transform your financial life. The link is in the description below. Now, let me continue with how to apply this principle. Who can serve as your witness? The Essenes taught that the witness should ideally be a family member. Your spouse is the best witness because your finances are shared. Your marriage is a covenant, and counting money within that covenant keeps the money protected by the covenant. When husband and wife count together, they are reinforcing the unity that God intended for marriage. They are practicing transparency that builds trust. They are sharing the burden of financial responsibility rather than carrying it alone. If you are married, your spouse should be your primary counting partner. If you are unmarried, a parent can serve as a witness. There is no shame in involving your parents in your financial life. In fact, the Essenes considered this honorable. It shows respect for their wisdom and invites their blessing over your finances. A sibling can also serve, particularly an older sibling who has demonstrated financial wisdom. If family is not available, A close friend from your faith community can serve as a witness. The key is that the witness should be someone who fears God, someone who understands the spiritual nature of what they are witnessing. This should not be a casual acquaintance or a coworker you barely know. This should be someone who can pray with you, someone who can remind you of God's faithfulness, someone whose presence brings peace rather than anxiety. Can a child serve as a witness? The Essenes said yes, with certain conditions. A child old enough to understand that money is being counted can serve as a witness. There is no specific age, but the child should be able to comprehend that something important is happening. In fact, including children in the counting of money teaches them important principles about finances, stewardship, transparency, and family participation in economic life. It trains them for their own financial lives later. It demystifies money and prevents it from becoming a source of secrecy and shame. But very young children, infants and toddlers who do not understand what is happening, do not count as witnesses in the spiritual sense. Their presence is precious, but they are not yet capable of the spiritual function of witnessing. What if you live alone and have no one available? This was rare in Essene community because they lived together intentionally. Isolation was discouraged in all areas of life, not just finances, but they had provisions for those in unusual circumstances, such as travelers or those who temporarily lived apart from community. If no human witness is available, speak the counting out loud as a declaration to heaven. Say something like, "I count this money in the presence of the Lord God of Israel, who sees all things. I invite the angelic hosts to witness this accounting. Let this count be established in the heavenly records as if 1,000 witnesses stood beside me." This verbal declaration transforms solitary counting into witnessed counting. It is not ideal, and the Essenes recommended finding human witnesses whenever possible, but it prevents the dangerous secrecy that opens doors to poverty. Some Essenes who traveled frequently would develop what they called a distant witness agreement. They would have a friend or family member who knew that at a certain time each day or week, the traveler would count their money. The friend would pray at that same time. Though physically separated, they were spiritually joined in the act of witnessing. The distance did not matter because the spiritual connection was established through prayer. If you are finding value in these ancient secrets, take a moment to subscribe to this channel and tap the notification bell. Every week, I reveal another practice from the caves of Qumran. These are practices that have been hidden for 2,000 years. Subscribe now so you do not miss a single revelation. And I want you to do something right now. In the comments below, type, "I never count alone." When you type this, you are making a commitment to follow this principle. You are declaring that from this day forward, you will not count money in isolation. Type it now. "I never count alone." Now let me tell you about a man who learned this principle the hard way. This story is preserved in the Essene records as a teaching example. It was told to new members of the community as a warning about the dangers of solitary counting. In the Essene records, there is an account of a merchant named Tobiah who came to the community after losing everything. He had been wealthy, very wealthy, perhaps one of the wealthiest merchants in the entire region. He had owned multiple properties scattered across the land. He had employed many workers who depended on him for their livelihood. He had warehouses full of goods. He had ships that carried his merchandise across the sea. He was known throughout the region for his success. People envied him. People sought to do business with him. Young merchants came to him asking for his secrets. He seemed blessed beyond measure, touched by the hand of God himself. But Tobiah had a habit, a secret habit that he thought was the very foundation of his success. Every night, after his household was asleep, after his wife and children had gone to their beds, after the servants had retired to their quarters, Tobiah would rise quietly. He would take a lamp and walk to his counting room. He would lock the door behind him. He would pull out his strong boxes. He would count every piece of gold and silver. He would calculate his wealth to the last coin. He would add up what he had gained that day. He would plan what he would gain tomorrow. He did this alone, in complete secret, believing that this secrecy protected him from theft and from the envy of others. He told no one about this habit. Not even his wife knew the full extent of their wealth. Tobiah believed that knowledge was power and that sharing knowledge meant sharing power, so he kept everything to himself. For many years, this habit seemed not only harmless but beneficial. In fact, Tobiah believed it was the very secret of his success. He was meticulous when others were careless. He was precise when others estimated. He knew exactly what he had at all times when others only guessed. He congratulated himself on his discipline. He pitied those who were not as careful as he was. But slowly, so slowly that he did not notice at first, something began to change. The anxiety that he felt during counting, that nervous excitement as he added up his gold, began to follow him outside the counting room. It did not stay contained. It leaked into his days. He worried constantly about losing what he had. He became suspicious of his workers, watching them for signs of theft when there were none. He became stingy with his family, denying his wife things she needed, refusing his children small pleasures. He stopped giving to the poor because he feared he might need every coin himself someday. What if disaster struck? What if the market turned? What if enemies arose? He needed to keep everything. His generosity dried up like a stream in a drought, and no one could understand why a man so wealthy had become so tight-fisted. Then the losses began. At first, they seemed like normal business setbacks. A shipment was lost at sea in a storm. These things happened to every merchant occasionally. But then a warehouse burned in what appeared to be an accident. Then a major debtor fled the region without paying what he owed. Then a business partner cheated him in a deal that should have been simple. Then another shipment was lost. Then thieves broke into one of his properties. Each loss seemed random, unconnected to the others. Bad luck, Tobiah told himself. A difficult season that would pass. But they kept coming. Loss after loss after loss. It was as if an invisible hand was systematically dismantling everything he had built. Within 3 years, Tobiah had lost everything. His properties were sold to pay debts. His workers were dismissed. His ships were seized by creditors. His warehouses stood empty. His family was reduced to poverty, dependent on the charity of relatives who had once envied them. Tobiah came to the Essenes desperate for understanding. What had happened? Why had God turned against him? He had worked hard. He had been careful. He had been disciplined. He had done everything right, or so he thought. The elders listened to his story with patience and compassion. They asked many questions about his life, his practices, his habits, his relationships. When they asked about his habit of counting money alone, Tobiah did not think it was significant. He almost did not mention it. Of course he counted alone. Everyone counted alone. That was just common sense. That was just how a careful man protected what was his. The elders exchanged knowing glances. Then they explained the principle. They explained what happens spiritually when money is counted in isolation. They explained the 4 doors that open: anxiety, greed, broken witness, and poverty curse. They explained how each door lets in a spirit that attaches to finances and slowly destroys them from within. As they spoke, Tobiah's face changed. The blood drained from his cheeks. He began to see the pattern that had been invisible to him. The anxiety that had grown year by year like a vine climbing a wall. The greed that had hardened his heart until he could not give even when giving cost him nothing. The isolation that had separated him from his own family, from community, from accountability. The losses that had followed one after another as if guided by an invisible hand. The poverty curse had activated, not through some dramatic ritual or obvious sin, not through theft or dishonesty or any crime that the law could punish, through the simple, seemingly innocent, even praiseworthy habit of counting money alone. The elders helped Tobiah begin his restoration. They taught him to never count alone again. They assigned him a counting partner from the community. Every time Tobiah needed to know his financial situation, he would do it with his partner present. At first, this felt strange and uncomfortable. He was not used to transparency, but slowly he began to feel the difference. The anxiety lifted. The greed softened. His heart opened again to generosity, and the losses stopped. Provision began to flow again. Within 2 years, Tobiah had rebuilt much of what he had lost. Not through secrecy and isolation, but through transparency and community. He later said that the lesson he learned was worth more than all the gold he had ever possessed. He had learned that money was never meant to be a private matter. It was always meant to exist within community, within relationship, within the witness of others. My brothers and sisters, examine your own habits. Do you count your money alone? Do you check your bank accounts in private, late at night when no one is watching? Do you calculate your finances in isolation, carrying the weight of the numbers by yourself? If so, you may have opened doors without knowing it. Starting today, change your practice. When you need to count money or review your finances, invite your spouse to sit with you. If you have no spouse, invite a trusted friend or family member. If you must count alone, speak your counting out loud as a declaration to heaven, inviting angelic witness. Close the doors that have been opened through years of solitary counting. Speak these words: I repent of counting money alone. I close every door that was opened through isolation. I cancel every agreement made with anxiety, greed, and poverty through solitary counting. From this day forward, I count in community. I count in witness. I count in transparency. The poverty curse is broken. Amen. If you are ready for complete transformation, the 21-day protocol is waiting. The Essene Wealth Code will guide you through this principle and 20 other practices that will transform your relationship with money forever. The link is in the description. Before you leave, type one more time: I never count alone. Let this be your commitment. Let this be your declaration. The principle has been revealed. The practice has been taught. Now it is time for you to apply what you have learned. My brothers and sisters in the light, remember why the Essenes never counted money alone. Solitary counting invites anxiety. Solitary counting activates greed. Solitary counting breaks the principle of witness. Solitary counting opens the door to the poverty curse. But counting with a witness prevents all of these. Counting with a witness keeps money in its proper place as a relational blessing rather than a private burden. For over 200 years, the Essenes counted money with witnesses. For over 200 years, not one of them fell into poverty. The principle is proven. The practice is available to you today. May the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob protect your finances through the witness of community. May anxiety flee from your counting. May greed be kept far from your heart. May every door to poverty be permanently closed. May you always count in the presence of witnesses who remind you that your provision comes from the one who sees all things. Go in peace, go in power, go in prosperity. Until next time, this is Rabbi Enoch, keeper of the scrolls, servant of the light. Shalom.